performance, the topic that comes up quite a lot is the topic of altitude training. We see the professionals do it quite often, either by going to a high altitude training camp or by simulating a high altitude training environment by going to an altitude house or tent. But for us who can't have access to those, is there a way of cheating our way to altitude training? You might have seen one of these before. It's called an elevation training mask, and companies that produce these say that it simulates the effects of high altitude training. But do they really work? Let's break it down. The air has approximately 21% oxygen in it. At sea level, that air pressure is relatively high. When we get to altitude, that air pressure is relatively low. Air enters the body through a process called diffusion, which is the movement of a gas from high pressure to low pressure. So that would be high pressure outside to low pressure in the lungs. This process is more efficient at sea level because we have a relatively high pressure of air coming in already. When we get to altitude, that reduced air pressure makes it more difficult, less efficient to diffuse gases into our body and therefore utilize oxygen. Due to this decrease in diffusion efficiency, the body needs to compensate. To compensate, what it does is it stimulates the naturally occurring hormone called EPO. EPO increases the number of red blood cells produced and therefore increases our oxygen carrying capacity of the blood to compensate for the lack of diffusion happening. What these masks do is they restrict the total amount of airflow from outside the body to inside the body. What it fails to do is change the atmospheric pressure of that air, so we're not actually simulating altitude at all. What we're doing is simulating what it would be like to breathe more difficultly. A way to think about this is that if you tried to run with a peg on your nose and breathing through a straw, you'd be getting a similar effect. So, the big question, does cheating our way to altitude actually work? No, it doesn't. The only way to gain the physiological benefits of training at altitude is either by being in a high altitude environment or by simulating it in an altitude house or tent. Having said that, the benefits of altitude training have been shown to only really last for about 2 to 3 weeks post the altitude exposure period. This means we're only looking at minor gains of maybe 1 or 2% in our endurance performance. So overall, it's not really a big deal. There are plenty of other ways that we can improve our endurance performance before we start looking at altitude.
Guys, if you like this video, please comment any questions below and get involved in our METS Mastermind group. We're going to post the link below, but it's a free group where we post every bit of content that we create, whether it's a video, an article, a blog, something that we find in the endurance industry. We put it all in there and you can actually ask questions about anything related to endurance performance. It's completely free. Click the link below, get involved.